In this video, we'll be going over the IRS Interactive Tax Assistant tool that helps taxpayers determine whether or not their child or dependent can qualify for the child tax credit or the credit for other dependents. So you'll need a couple of pieces of information for this form. You're going to need to know your tax filing status. You're going to need to understand whether or not you can claim this person as a dependent on your tax return, and you're going to need to know the person's date of birth. So the IRS estimates that this assistant tool should take about 10 minutes to complete. Let's go ahead and begin. So for this, we're going to select the most recent tax year, which is 2023. And it asks what your tax filing status is for the tax year. So as a reminder, anything that's highlighted in blue, you can always click on it and the website will give you a more clear definition of that term or phrase. So your tax filing status determines your tax rate, the amount of your tax deductions, and your eligibility for certain tax credits. So you can select between single, married filing jointly, married couple filing a joint separate tax return, head of household, or a qualifying surviving spouse with a dependent child. So your tax filing status for 2023 would depend on what your marital status is on December 31st of 2023. So let's select a married couple filing a joint tax return. So do you have a valid Social Security number? That is a prerequisite for being able to claim this tax credit. Does your spouse have a valid Social Security number? Let's select no, just in case. Now, does your spouse have a valid individual taxpayer ID number? So let's click on that. This is a tax identification number that's available to individuals who are required to have some identification number but do not have a Social Security number or cannot obtain one from the Social Security Administration. So if you don't have a Social Security number, then it asks whether or not you have an ITIN. Now, did you have a prior year disallowance of a tax credit for any reason other than a math or a clerical error? So certain tax credits, if they were disallowed in a prior year and the IRS determines that you tried to claim a tax credit that you knew you weren't eligible for, they can disallow you for certain periods of time for future claims of that tax credit, even if you become eligible for that credit in the future. So the child tax credit, earned income tax credit, these are all tax credits that have high rates of abuse or fraud related to them. And if the IRS deems it necessary, they can ban you for a certain period of time from claiming those in the future. So you're just simply going to add persons that you can claim a tax credit for. So let's name this person James. And we're just going to add James. Now let's continue. What's James's relationship to you? So here are all of the different types of relationships. And for the child tax credit, all of these descriptions of a child, whether it's a biological, adopted child, stepchild, foster child, these are all acceptable. You can claim a tax credit as a dependent for any of these other relationships. So let's just keep it simple. We're going to claim James as a biological child. You can, let's just say that he was just born a couple months ago and he is a U.S. citizen. So a requirement is that you have to be a U.S. citizen. Your child has to be a citizen. Has to have a social security number. So we are claiming James as a dependent, and let's just say that James does not have a valid social security number. Let's see what happens. So he must have a social security number because that's part of the tax law. So he's not a he does not qualify for the dependent or the credit for other dependents. So let's go back and say James does have a valid social security number. Was he born alive? Did he die? No. Now we go further. Another criteria is that James or the child has to have lived with you more than half of the time that they were alive during the tax year. So James, in this case, is a qualifying child for the child tax credit. You would complete Schedule 8812, which is the credits for qualifying children and other dependents. The maximum child tax credit is $2,000 per child, and it is subject to an income limitation. So you can see that right here. You may also be able to claim the additional child tax credit. So if you have any of that tax credit left after reducing your tax, the remainder might be refundable. You can't claim a credit for other dependents and the child tax credit at the same time. So he only qualifies for that one. Let's go back, and we're going to say that James is half brother. Now let's see what this says. Are you claiming James as a dependent? Does James have a valid social security number? Yes, he does. Was he born alive? Did he die? No. Did he live with you more than half the year? So he's a qualifying child for the child tax credit. Even though he's not technically your child, you are claiming him as a dependent. You can claim him as a child dependent. What happens if James was your parent and now your parent was born, let's say, so in this case, James is not a qualifying child. Obviously, he qualifies for the credit for other dependents. It's a maximum of $500 per credit, subject to an income limitation. You would complete Schedule 8812 to determine the amount of your credit. So, and reminder, tax credits are better than tax deductions. Why? Because the tax credit is a dollar for dollar reduction of your tax bill, whereas a tax deduction is simply limiting the amount of income that your tax is calculated on. And the difference between tax credits, there are refundable and non-refundable credits. A refundable credit can reduce your tax all the way down to zero and beyond, resulting in a net refund, even if you didn't owe a tax bill. Whereas a non-refundable credit can only reduce your tax bill down to zero. So the one last thing that I want to cover in this video, I usually cover it in these videos, is whenever you are making a decision for your tax return based on the information in a video, you should first print this. So based on information that you got from this tax assistant, I apologize. So you should print this screen and then go over it line by line. Make sure that you answered the questions exactly as you intended, that you didn't make any mistakes, any typos, anything like that. And either you made a mistake and hopefully you'll catch it then and there, or what you would like to do is keep this as documentation with your tax return. And if you're ever questioned by the IRS, it's not going to be right after you file your tax return. It'll be a couple years down the road when you've long forgotten about it. So if you keep this in your tax records, you'll be able to pull it up as a reference. This is how I made my decision. This is my thought process. And if you owed taxes and you made a mistake, then the IRS will simply correct the mistake. You'll end up having to pay the tax that you would have otherwise paid and interest. But what you're looking at is trying to make sure that the IRS understands the difference between an honest mistake and something like an accuracy related penalty or a negligence related penalty. Something where it just showed that that you paid a little bit of attention, you're exercising due diligence, and you made a simple mistake. Because if the IRS has the impression that you just threw whatever up there trying to make it stick, then they can start attaching penalties on top of the taxes that you already owe. So it's not a big deal to pay back tax that you should have paid had you calculated it properly. If by avoiding a mistake, that's not a big deal. What you want to avoid are those accuracy related penalties, or the IRS getting a little bit more nosy into your finances. So this is a good way to show them that you are doing the right thing. That's all we have for this video. There are a couple of forms that were mentioned. I'll go ahead and put links to the articles and videos that we've created in the show notes. If you like our articles, please subscribe to our newsletter. If you like our videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you have any questions, comments, or if there's a topic you'd like us to cover in a future video, please don't hesitate. Put a comment in the comment section and we'll take a look at it. Thank you very much and have a great day.